Well, hello everyone. It is so wonderful to see you all. Welcome. It's great to see lots of familiar faces. I encourage everyone to share a greeting in the chat box and let us know where you're zooming in from. It's always fun to see where folks are calling in from all across the country. My name is Catherine Gillette, and I'm an organizer on the grassroots mobilization team here. Tonight, I am joined by my colleagues Meg Olson, Sister Emily Tukolsky, and Colin Longmore from the Grassroots Mobilization Team. And also we are joined by Lee Morrow, who is Network's press secretary. And we're all very excited to be here with you all this evening. And so in the weeks and months ahead, we are expecting a number of very close votes on the issues that we care about. And as members and supporters of Network, you all know how very important your advocacy is going to be, and that letters to the editor, or LTEs as we like to call them, are a fantastic way to both advocate and also shape the public narrative. So we are going to have lots of fun talking about those tonight. But before we go any further, I do want to let you all know we are going to be recording this evening's program. So just wanted to give you a heads up about that. But we will be stopping the recording when we spend time in small groups and that sort of thing. So you don't have to worry about that. And now I am thrilled to introduce Network's press secretary, Lee Morrow. Lee.
Hey everybody, so glad y'all are all here. My name is Lee Morrow. I am press secretary, as Catherine said, here at Network. And today I'm going to be talking about how to write letters to the editor. We have a ton of people here tonight, so I think that we might come out of this with a lot of great letters to the editor. There's going to be time for people to break into small groups and write some of their own, and then afterwards I'll talk with y'all. Some folks are going to read their letters, and we'll talk about how they can improve, what some of the great stuff is. So let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here. All right. I think people can probably see this. So as I said, Lee Morrow here, press secretary at Network. And I'm just going to dive right in. So why letters to the editor? I think most of y'all here probably recognize some of the importance of letters to the editor. That's why you're here tonight. But letters to the editor are actually a super powerful tool that is really easy to use. So it's a great piece of organizing that can have big effects. So firstly, y'all probably know that local newspapers have been farming out content to news wires and republishing things, and instead of having local reporters, as newspapers have run out of revenue, they've started firing reporters and replacing everybody with national stories. But letters to the editor, that section of the paper is one of the few places for local content and local opinions. That's why they're one of the most widely read sections of any local paper. The second reason why they're really important is members of Congress pay a lot of attention to what papers in their districts are saying about them. They have staffers whose job it is to look at papers, pull every time their name is mentioned, and make sure that they see it because it has a real impact on them. So LTEs are often the easiest way to be heard by elected leaders. And then thirdly, LTE campaigns can create movements. So if you coordinate with others and you write multiple letters across every week, multiple local papers with many members, many different, say, network members, all writing different letters, asking for the same thing, demanding a member of Congress take action, then both that member of Congress and your local community are going to see that constituents care a lot about an issue. And that builds support in Congress and at home. Let's see. Perfect. So how do you actually write a letter to the editor? They're really easy to write and submit. They're very short. So the first thing you want to do before you start writing is find out your local paper's LTE rules. Every paper has different rules. It's often different lengths. So you can find this by going on Google and Googling the name of your local paper and letters to the editor. And that will bring you to a page where they'll explain the rules. It'll usually be wrapped up with other stuff about op-eds and opinion pieces, but there should be a section there that explains the rules around LTEs. And you really only want to submit letters to papers that you can personally receive, because papers don't like to run letters from people who live outside of their circulation area. So every paper has different length requirements. They're generally 150 to 200 words. Sometimes they're longer. Sometimes letters to the editor can be as long as, as an op-ed or a story. That's rare, but it does happen. But on the most part, 150 words to 200 words is really short. So you want your letter to be short and to the point. And then the next step is to find what your paper is talking about with the issue that you care about. So papers really like to publish LTEs that respond to their own work. It's kind of a cycle where they'll publish maybe an opinion piece or a news piece, and then they like to publish letters that are directly responding to that. They want to hear from their readers. So this is where you probably might need to get a bit creative. You could get really lucky. So let's say you wanted to write an LTE asking your member of Congress to support the DREAM Act. If you're really lucky, maybe they just covered the DREAM Act. Maybe there's an opinion piece or an editorial from the paper Ed Board itself talking about immigration and the DREAM Act. Then you can respond directly to those pieces. But if they haven't covered it, they probably covered something tangential to immigration. And you can tie immigration to things like recent coverage of jobs or the economy. So you can get a bit creative and make your letter fit with the local coverage. So how do you actually write one of these? It's usually easiest to start with your qualifications. And don't worry, you're all qualified. Some of you I know are sisters. I myself am just a multi-issue Catholic. I'm not a sister. So use your title if you have one. It's really powerful. And if you don't, you have who you are. You have your own personal story. So include that in your piece, and it's usually good to start with that. So let's say I saw a really inflammatory op-ed that I wanted to respond to. And I might start with, as a multi-issue Catholic voter, I cannot stay silent while Congressman Jones vilifies our immigrant neighbors in his February 10th op-ed titled "Illegal Immigrants Don't Deserve Handouts." Sadly, that is something we can probably pretty easily see in local papers around the country. And I want to write a letter to the editor. I'm angry about this, and I have something really to say. So the next step, after I have that little intro part, is tell them what you think. So I could continue. Dreamers and undocumented immigrants are essential workers who have helped keep this community running during the pandemic. They deserve access to COVID relief and citizenship. And then finally, after that section, you want to bring it all together with the legislative ask, because that's really what this is about, getting the letter into the hands of a member of Congress and into the community and saying what needs to happen about this issue. So I could end my, my hypothetical letter here with, I pray that Congressman Jones opens his heart and listens to his constituents. Undocumented people are our neighbors, community members, friends, and family. Catholic voters like me expect Congressman Jones to support the DREAM Act. So with those 3 points, add a couple sentences in between, get it up to 150 or 200 words, and you've got a whole LTE. It's really pretty easy. The final thing is submission. So this is where you don't want to mess it up. You took the time, you found the right rules, you found the paper, you found the issue, you wrote the letter. Now you got to submit it. So back where you found your paper's rules on LTEs, they will also have within there submission guidelines. And that will include maybe an email address where you're supposed to send your letter to, or it might have an online form where you type it in and you submit through their website. It will also say other info that you need to send them, like your full name, your address, your phone number, and your email address. Only your name and town will be published in the paper itself, but they want to verify that you're a local. So yeah, that's it. A couple quick tips before we send you off to write your own stuff. And we can take questions. I don't know the format, Catherine, how you want to do that, but right after this, we can take questions if you'd like. But quick tips. You won't always get published. I've written a bunch of letters to the editor. Sometimes they're published, sometimes they're not. It just really depends on what all is being sent in. But you can write to multiple local papers. I know that in Washington, D.C., we got a bunch of papers, small and big, and I can write to all of them if I wanted to. And if I don't get published in one of these papers, I can come back to that paper. Now, I don't want to do it too often. I don't want to seem like I'm pestering them, but you can come back to that paper maybe 3 weeks or so after you wrote your last letter and submit a new one. But the main thing to remember, and the reason that we're all here together tonight, is that if you work with other advocates and you plan out a campaign where different folks are sending in letters each week, you'll make a much bigger impact. So those are the tips. That's the guidelines. Should we take questions now, Catherine, or later? How you want to do it?
Yeah, so I think we have about 8 minutes or 7 minutes before we need to break off. So we have time for a few questions. And I guess folks can maybe just raise their hand. Is that the best way to do it? I see Patrick O'Connor from Ohio has raised his hand. So Patrick, do you have a question for us? You're muted, Patrick. You may need to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. As many times I've Zoomed, I'm challenged unmuting. But once unmuted, you cannot stop me. 2 questions, please. On how to, the second item, tell them what. I didn't have a chance to.
Just tell them what you think.
What I think. Okay, thank you. And also, is it common that once a letter is accepted, that the publication will not accept another letter for X amount of time afterwards?
Yes, that is pretty common. You'll probably, if they accept your letter, you'll probably want to wait that 3-week period, maybe even a little bit longer. But that's where this whole group organizing together comes in. You can find others who can submit letters, stuff like that.
And lastly, is it also common that a publication will require exclusivity?
Yeah, so oftentimes you do not want to send the exact same letter to multiple papers. It's just kind of bad form. It's better to tweak letters. You can write something with the same point and some of the same content, honestly, but you want different publications to receive different versions of letters.
And I have to quickly give Patrick a shout out because he wrote and published a wonderful letter not too long ago in the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. So he's one of our pros. All right.
Thank you, Catherine. You're going to give me a fat head.
All right. I also see a hand from Lorraine.
Yes, I just wanted to know if there was a simple letter you could put up on screen that we could go through together.
That's a good question. So I think that we're going to do that together, right, Catherine?
I think we are going to have folks write their own, and then we'll have a couple of samples to share.
Oh, so you're going to wait till later.
Or
Okay.
Emily, do you have?
Okay, I was going to say, I mean, we could pull up the one from the voting record sample page. There are some samples there if we have time.
Just to go through those steps with the qualifications here, the what you think, just to show us that before we break out and do our other work.
I'd like that too.
I have a letter I can work on pulling up if somebody wants to go to the next question, and we can come back to that in a moment.
It looks like Lorraine, you're up next.
That was me.
About writing letters to
Does anyone else have a question? You can find the raised hand in the participants window. Or who's speaking? James.
Yes, are there any slides available of the guidance lines?
about writing.
Absolutely. We'll send those around.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if I can share my screen for just a minute, I do want to I have a sample that I can share with you all. This was actually written by one of our Virginia members who wrote a LTE about HR 1, the For the People Act. and was published just a couple of weeks ago. And so I can kind of give that as a sample of what this might look like. All right, so Lee, do you want to kind of talk us through this?
Yeah, so we can see she starts, do you know who wrote this? I don't see a name.
Oh, it's down at the bottom.
Helen.
Helen Brewster.
So Helen starts out giving a little bit of her personal story, and it's not even a real personal story, just ties it back to something about them. My parents instilled this in me as a duty of citizenship. So starting out, making it personal. And then after that, goes into what she thinks. So she's concerned about the false narrative, about this whole stop the steal and all of that propaganda. And then she goes directly after that to what needs to happen. So she says she wants more people to vote, wants to expand access to early voting, address gerrymandering, enhance absentee voting, and then ties it to Abigail Spanberger supporting HR 1, the For the People Act. So it's that simple structure where you start out talking about yourself, then you talk about what you think, then you talk about the issue, and then you tie it back to a piece of legislation.
And so again, this is one that was published just a couple weeks ago. And so I think it follows that format beautifully, and it got published. All right, do we have any other questions? I think we have about a minute before we need to split off. Karen, I see your hand.
Yes. If I don't read the paper that I'm submitting to, is that liability?
Nope,
Because we
that's
do
totally
have-
fine.
So I have no way of knowing if they publish it, since our smaller papers I don't get.
Yeah, so that has come up with us too, because sometimes local papers won't put their content online. If it does go online, then it's pretty easy to find. Then oftentimes we can find it ourselves, and we can send it around to let you know it's been published. But if it's not online, usually the best way that we've been able to find it is to just talk to others in the community who do get the paper, and tell them to look out for it and see if they can find that it's been published.
Philo?
So you're saying it is worth to submit to papers that I don't get?
It is, yes. It's definitely worth it as long as you're in their circulation area, as long as it's paper you could get. It's fine that you don't read it. I don't receive a lot of the papers I submit letters to the editor to, but I could. So that's really the important thing. You could be a reader and you are a constituent, somebody within their circulation area. That's what matters.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that when you give your qualifications, the place where I work is a university, and they had a problem 10 years ago, and they said, be sure not to put our name down in your letter as if to lend weight to what you're saying, because that is not permitted by our workplace. So even though you could say the kind of job you have, you should not say the specific place you have it if you feel it gives you qualification.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you work somewhere where that may be a problem, then yeah, I mean, err on the side of caution. It's more important to say maybe I'm a teacher or professor. But you can also say I'm a member of Network Advocates. I'm a Catholic voter. So we're all qualified in different ways.
Lee, do you want to answer maybe one or two more questions really quickly, and then we can give some folks some time to do some drafting?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So John, you're up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so very nice overview, and your summary was clean in terms of the flow. Are there any guidance on what not to say in letters to the editor, number one? And number two is, how do you prevent people taking target at you, as you post? I mean, that's part of the risk, I guess, especially if you post digitally online. Any recommendations to blunt that or to avoid that?
Yeah, those are really good questions. Really good questions. So for the first one, generally avoid anything too inflammatory. The paper doesn't want to publish things that are over the line or too aggressively attacking, especially directly attacking people by name. So don't do anything over the line. Nothing too inflammatory. Keep it about the issue, and then you'll be able. That'll work. About yourself. So sometimes I've seen this before. People will write letters to the editor about letters to the editor. That does happen. And then it can start a little conversation within the letters to the editor section. That's kind of something that you just have to accept. That will happen. And as long as you keep it sticking to the issues and bring it back to your own personal story about why you believe what you believe, that blunts a lot of the ability for these personal attacks to come at you.
And also, I think in terms of tone as well, it's important to note that, yes, you want to write something that's going to get published, but also tone is so important because you are helping to shape the narrative around these issues. And so how we as people of faith, people who believe in Catholic social teaching and Catholic social justice, talk about these issues matters, because it'll help to shape what people are saying about these issues and what people are thinking about these issues. And so I really do see this as a very powerful tool.
That's exactly right.
And Jane.
I had to unmute yourself.
I unmuted myself. Just a point, your local library will subscribe to local newspapers. So whether you have a smaller town library or a larger regional, libraries are an incredible source for all of that media information. There are newspapers I read and some I don't, but I go to the library and there they are.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we want to give everybody a chance to play around with this a little bit. The most important thing in learning is doing. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes or so to just start with a draft. Many of you, if you signed up ahead of time, got some talking points in your email yesterday on your issue areas that you selected. If you did not, there's a link to those in the chat. So you can either do the democracy talking points or the immigration if you remember what you signed up for. And so after about 10 minutes, we'll send you into breakout rooms of 2 or 3 people, and you'll have a chance to read your letters to each other and offer suggestions, feedback, highlight what worked. And we'll give you some guiding questions on that. But for now, we'll stay in the main room and just spend about 10 minutes starting to get a draft together of what you think you want to say. Hi, people trickling back in, getting a few here and there. I hope your time was good. We'll get a whole rush of you in about 10 seconds. Here
they come.
Here they all come. All coming back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I hope that your time in your small groups was helpful and informative. We're going to close out with a few last pieces. First of all, we have a couple of pre-chosen volunteers. So we're going to have 2 people who will read their letters as examples, and Lee will offer some feedback. So my wonderful mother has volunteered to be one of those. So Jeannie, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
I don't know if it was volunteered or voluntold.
True.
But I'm always happy to share. Here goes. As a retired educator from both public and Catholic schools, I believe we have a moral responsibility to care for our neighbors, especially those most in need. COVID-19 has devastated immigrant communities. These are our neighbors, our family members and friends who provide food, healthcare, services, and other essential work that keeps our economy working. I need to change that word. People who sacrifice their own health and safety for the benefit of other citizens are true patriots and should be able to live in the security of knowing that they have a pathway to citizenship. I urge Senators Young and Braun to support the Dream Act, I think it's the Dream and Promise Act of 2021, the legislation that will provide pathway to citizenship for essential workers, are true heroes who seek legal citizenship.
Amen. That was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was really good. To start with your own personal credentials, really powerful. And then to bring in all the different issues that immigrants face today during COVID and how they are literally sacrificing themselves for all of us, while at the same time bringing in that piece of legislation, the stuff that will help. And then I really like that you directed it to both of your senators at the end. That's something I forgot to mention. Obviously, with the House, you only have one member of Congress, but when you're talking about senators, you have both of them. So make sure to hit them both non-violently, and both of their offices will see it. They'll see the constituents are talking to them with their name. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Trisha Massa is going to read hers as well. Thank you.
Okay. As a lifelong voter who believes in the importance of free and fair elections, I am concerned about the new redistricting occurring in our state this spring. The supermajority in our Republican legislature has no incentive to draw fair districts, which will continue to result in gerrymandered districts and therefore voter suppression in our state. Federal reforms are needed now for basic accessibility standards to protect voters in every state to be able to cast their ballots in federal elections. I encourage Senators Young and Braun to support S1, which will require states to use independent redistricting commissions to draw federal congressional districts and ban racial and partisan gerrymandering, and urge all voters to contact them to support this legislation as well.
That was fantastic. I really liked how you brought in the local situation, the supermajority in the state legislature. Bringing in that piece will make it will make the paper see it as much more of a local issue, something that really impacts your area and where the paper circulates, and will help that letter get published. So that was really good. And then at the end, your call to action to tell other members of the public to talk to their legislators. That's how you build a movement. I love that. So fantastic. Great job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, both Trisha and Jeannie. And I see a hand with Mary. Mary, did you have a last question?
Thank you. Would they mind posting those on it, and we can get them by email from you, Sister Emily? Or
that's a great question. Trisha and Jeannie, would you be interested in sharing your examples with others in written form?
Sure.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Because I did something more on the local level, but I want to do something on a bigger level. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Mary Montgomery, did you also have a question? You're good. You're. There you go. Now you're unmuted. You're good, Mary.
That was my same question.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
So great.
I'm so excited to have the copies coming. Oh, come on. Where did I?
Wonderful reviews from the field here. And Dawn, you have a question?
Yes. Would it be possible? I signed up for the functional democracy letter writing. Would it be possible for me to get the talking points for immigration as well?
That's a great question. So I actually just have that question in the chat as well. So we'll make sure to send all of the talking points out to everybody, along with the recording, the sample letters, and we have another event coming up that I will highlight in a minute. So we'll send that as well. Thank you for asking. And one last question, Mary Lou. Let's make sure you're unmuted.
I wonder if it would be good to send copies of the letter to the representatives or senators that you're mentioning in the letter. Would you do that? Or do they get too much mail as it is?
Oh, no. I'll just say as an organizer with Network, anytime one of my members gets a letter to the editor published naming an elected official, I tell our lobbyists right away, and you better believe they bring that letter to the editor, to that office, and say, hey, your constituents are concerned about this issue and you are concerned too. And so definitely, if you want to send it to your member of Congress, if you want to tell us about it, we can send it to your member of Congress. That's definitely important.
Yep. So that actually brings me to kind of the close of this evening, and that is your call to action. So you have a letter now. You have written a letter, you've given each other feedback, you've made each other's letters stronger. You are ready to submit them to your local newspapers. You need to tweak a few things, feel free, but overall you're ready. And so our call to action is to submit your letter to the editor. If and when it gets published, please let us know so that we can, as Catherine said, lift it up to your legislators. And please keep writing letters to the editor. Please stay in touch with Network. We are so grateful to have you here. This has been, just phenomenal turnout. We're so glad to see the excitement and the energy that you all brought to this workshop. So I want to say a special thank you to each and every one of you. And just want to also highlight that February is Black History Month, and next Thursday at 7, we'll be having a special community conversation honoring Black History Month. So that link will be in the email that we send out as well. But Network board member Leslie Colvin, who is an amazingly powerful voice for justice, is going to share her story. And then we're going to have some conversation around the realities of racism and what we can do in our communities. And we know that for so many of you, that's an issue that you're passionate about. So we hope you can join us next Thursday. We hope you stay in touch. Let us know about your letters. We'll also include a link to a feedback form so that you can let us know how this went, give us any suggestions.